You have been busy. Not occasionally busy, but relentlessly, exhaustingly busy. Calendars filled, mornings consumed, nights shortened, tasks started and left half-finished, projects layered on top of projects until the original effort is buried beneath the weight of the next attempt. And still, after all of it, after all that motion and sacrifice and genuine effort, the result you were working toward has not fully arrived. You are not lazy. No one could accuse you of that. What you are is scattered. Your force divided across too many directions, your energy spent before it ever concentrates into power. The belief you have been living by seems reasonable on the surface. More action means more results. More hours mean more progress. The person who does the most must eventually win the most. So when wealth does not come, the immediate conclusion is that you have not done enough, that the solution is another task, another hustle, another thing to start. This is the great misunderstanding that keeps industrious people poor. Volume is not the answer. The problem was never that you were doing too little. The problem is that most of what you have been doing belongs to a category called inefficient action, motion that exhausts but does not create. Near the turn of the 20th century, a man named Wallace Wattles wrote a small, precise, and quietly devastating book called The Science of Getting Rich. Inside it, he offered a principle that most people who claim to have read the book still manage to miss. Wattles did not teach frantic effort. He did not reward the person who did the most things. He taught something far more exact, that wealth comes through action performed in the certain way. Action rooted in definite thought, held in a creative inner state, carried out in the present place with complete efficiency. The person who masters this kind of action, Wattles argued, does not merely work toward wealth. They become the channel through which wealth must pass. This video will reveal that one certain action, not a list of habits, not a productivity system. One kind of action, the kind that cannot miss when it is properly aligned. Before this explanation is finished, something important will have shifted in the way you understand what you have been doing all this time. Because the most likely reason wealth has not arrived is not that you have been inactive. It is that you have been confusing motion with efficiency and movement with creation. Those are not the same thing, and the difference between them is everything. Consider an ordinary morning in the life of someone who is genuinely trying. The alarm sounds early. There is a list already waiting. Things to follow up on, messages to answer, plans to execute. Before the first task is finished, the second is already demanding attention. By midday, the schedule is behind. By evening, the original priority of the morning has been displaced 3 times over by other urgent things, none of which were planned, and most of which will not be remembered by the following week. This is not a character flaw. This is the shape of a life built around the belief that more motion equals more progress. The emotional texture of this kind of day is specific. There is a particular fatigue that comes not from deep work, but from surface-level scrambling, a weariness that feels different from honest tiredness. Honest tiredness comes with a sense of completion. This other fatigue comes with a residue of unease, a feeling that despite everything, not enough was done. The hours were filled, but the substance was thin. The effort was real, but the results are vague. Something important keeps not getting done, and the solution the mind offers is always the same. Try harder tomorrow. Over time, this pattern compounds. The backlog of unfinished things grows, the attempts multiply, the emotional investment accumulates, and so does the disappointment. There is a specific kind of person who has tried more things in pursuit of wealth than almost anyone they know, and who has less to show for it than people who appear to have tried less. This person is not a failure of will. They are the product of a method that was never going to work, regardless of how faithfully it was followed. The method was wrong from the beginning, and the damage it does is not only financial. What is lost in this pattern is harder to quantify than money. The person who has worked hard and seen little result begins to develop a quiet, corrosive doubt about whether the connection between action and reward is even real. They may not say it openly, but somewhere underneath the continued effort is a growing suspicion that the universe does not respond fairly to honest work. That suspicion is dangerous, not because it is entirely wrong about the method they have been using, but because it threatens to poison the inner state required for the method that actually works. The frustration is real, But its solution is not more of what caused it. Panic is a powerful motivator and a destructive guide. When wealth does not arrive on schedule, the mind under pressure does not usually become more precise. It becomes more desperate, and desperation does not choose the right action. It chooses the available action, the one that feels most like doing something, the one most likely to quiet the anxiety for the next few hours. Acting from panic is not the same as acting from purpose. The body moves, the hours pass, the effort registers as real. But the direction is chosen by fear, and fear has never known the way to wealth. The person caught in this false method does not only act from panic, they also start too many things. Each new beginning carries a brief sensation of hope, a fresh attempt, a new possibility, a reset of the emotional clock. But hope without completion is not creative power. It is postponed failure with an optimistic face. Starting is easy. It requires almost no strength. Completing requires the full force of a mind willing to stay in contact with one thing long enough for that thing to become real. The scattered person is an expert at beginnings and a stranger to completions. Another component of the false method is imitation. The temptation is understandable. If someone else appears to be succeeding, the most natural response is to copy what they appear to be doing. But copying the visible actions of another person without understanding the invisible inner state from which those actions come produces the form of the method without its substance. Two people can perform what appears to be the same action. One of them is doing it from definite creative consciousness, held in faith, anchored in gratitude. The other is doing it from observation and imitation. The results will not be the same, and no amount of precise copying will close that gap. Underneath all of this lies the central confusion, the belief that harder work automatically creates richer results. This is the assumption that drives the false method forward. Work harder, stay later, cut the rest shorter, push through the resistance. The ethic sounds noble. In certain forms and certain measures, it is. But when it is separated from definite thought, from a clear, specific, held inner purpose, it becomes what Wattles would have recognized immediately: competitive action, not creative action. Competing with circumstances, with time, with other people's success, produces no creative result. It produces exhaustion in the shape of effort. The most visible cost of scattered action is obvious enough: too many unfinished projects, a portfolio of half-realized attempts, a financial position that does not reflect the genuine effort invested. But the hidden cost goes deeper than the ledger. Scattered energy is genuinely depleted energy. When attention is divided across many fronts simultaneously, no single effort receives the complete quality of force required to open a channel. The action becomes thin. The impression made on circumstances is weak. The contact with opportunity is too brief to produce anything lasting. This is not mystical. It is simply what happens when full power is never concentrated in one place. The consequence of sustained scattering is weak follow-through, which compounds silently over time. The person who starts 10 things and finishes 3 of them does not simply have 7 unfinished projects. They have trained themselves through repetition in the habit of incompleteness. And habit is not merely behavioral, it is structural. The mind that has completed things repeatedly knows what completion feels like and will pursue it. The mind that has scattered repeatedly knows what beginning feels like and will manufacture new beginnings to replace the discomfort of following through. This is how an industrious person can remain in poverty for years while sincerely believing they are working toward wealth. A darker cost emerges after enough time in this pattern: resentment toward the work itself. Work that goes unrewarded begins to feel like a punishment. The task that should be a channel for wealth becomes an obstacle that stands between the present moment and a future that keeps not arriving. The person now brings an inner state of irritation or resignation to the very actions that could, under the right conditions, become their way through. They do the work, but they resent it. They complete the task, but they hate it. And that inner tone, that resentment embedded in the action, is not neutral. It changes the quality of what is done. Excellence requires a degree of alignment between the doer and the deed that resentment makes impossible. The final and most dangerous cost is the slow erosion of faith. Faith in Wattles' framework is not a sentiment or an attitude. It is a functional state, a definite inner conviction that the law works, that source responds, that action aligned with creative consciousness produces wealth. The person who has been scattering for years without reward does not maintain that faith easily. They may continue working, but the inner certainty that underlies certain action has been hollowed out by the experience of repeated disappointment. Without that certainty, the action changes in quality, even when it does not change in volume. The motion continues, the creative force behind it falters, and wealth which moves through channels opened by creative action finds no opening. It is important to be exact about what this diagnosis means. The problem is not action itself. Work is not the enemy. Effort is not the mistake. Throughout the science of getting rich, Wattles is emphatic. There is no substitute for action. The thinking stuff does not deliver wealth to passive people. Definite thought must be followed by definite movement. The correction being offered here does not replace action with stillness. It replaces one kind of action with a different kind, and that difference changes everything. What the preceding pattern reveals is not a failure of discipline or commitment. The scattered person is often extraordinarily disciplined and deeply committed. What is missing is not effort but alignment, the condition in which action is rooted in definite creative consciousness, carried out in the present place and brought to full completion before attention moves elsewhere. The inner state from which action proceeds is not a soft or secondary variable. In Wattles' framework, it is the primary variable. It is the difference between the action that creates and the action that merely moves. The law Wattles revealed operates on a principle that contradicts the ordinary assumption almost completely. Ordinary thinking says that wealth comes from doing more. The law says that wealth comes from doing the right thing completely. Ordinary thinking says that the person who covers the most ground will reach the destination first. The law says that the person who takes the most exact step will arrive, while the person covering the most ground may circle for years without approaching. The ground covered is not the measure. The alignment of the step is the measure. Everything that follows in this teaching rests on this reversal. The exhaustion you have felt was not the price of wealth almost reached. It was the signal of a method quietly failing while consuming the resources needed for a better one. The next section will show you precisely what Wattles meant by the action that guarantees wealth, and why, when that action is taken, it is genuinely impossible to miss. Wallace Wattles described what he called the certain way, and at its center was an instruction that is simpler to state than it is to fully grasp. Think in a certain way and act in a certain way, and wealth must come to you. The thinking comes first, but the action is what completes the circuit. Thought without action is an undelivered message. Action without thought is motion without destination. What Wattles required was the union of both, a specific inner condition expressed through a specific outer effort, each supporting the other until a channel was opened and wealth moved through it. Holding definite purpose is not the same as knowing what you want in a general sense. Most people have general wants. Wattles required something more specific and more sustained, a clear, formed mental image of the thing desired, held with consistency and conviction, not as a daydream, but as a target. The thought must be definite enough to impress the formless substance. Vague desire produces vague results at best and no results at all at worst. The definite thought acts like an instruction given with authority to the creative force that underlies all visible form. It is not a request. In Wattles' framework, it is a command issued from the right inner position. Gratitude occupies a place in this law that surprises many people when they first encounter it. It is not a courtesy. Wattles wrote that gratitude is the attitude that keeps the person in harmony with the creative intelligence of the universe. The person who resents their present position is, in a very specific sense, in opposition to the source that must supply what they need. Resentment says, "What I have now is wrong, incomplete, undeserved." Gratitude says, "What I have now is the ground from which the desired form will grow." These are not the same inner posture, and they do not produce the same results when action is taken from them. Everything that can be done today must be done today. This is one of Wattles' most demanding instructions, and it is demanding precisely because it refuses the habit of postponement. There is always a reason to defer the present action. Circumstances are not yet ideal. Resources are not yet sufficient. The moment seems premature. But the law does not wait for ideal circumstances. It operates through the present place, using what is available now. The action taken today in the certain way does not merely produce today's result. It opens tomorrow's channel. The person who waits for perfect conditions before acting in the certain way does not understand how the law works. Each action must be done efficiently and completely. This is the hinge on which the entire principle turns. Not quickly, not impressively, not with the appearance of effort, efficiently. Efficiency in Wattles' sense means that every action gives more in use value than it takes in cash value. It means that nothing is wasted. The full quality of the creative mind is brought to bear on the present task, and the task is not abandoned until it has received everything required to make it complete. Completeness is not perfectionism. It is the act of closing the circuit, of allowing the action to fully transmit what the thought has impressed upon it. An incomplete action is like an unaddressed envelope. The message was written, but it was never delivered. To understand Wattles correctly, it is necessary to know what he was not teaching, because the misreadings of his work are as instructive as the readings. Wattles was not teaching idleness. He was not writing a philosophy of passive reception in which the right attitude summons wealth without effort. His text is explicit. The person who thinks in the certain way and takes no action will not get rich. The formless substance does not do physical work on your behalf. It opens channels. You must walk through them. The walking is yours to do. At the same time, Wattles was not teaching hustle. He was not celebrating exhaustion as a virtue. He was not suggesting that the person who works the longest hours or carries the heaviest schedule is closest to the law. Hustle in the modern sense is actually in tension with what Wattles described, because hustle is driven by anxiety and the fear of falling behind, while certain action is driven by clarity and the certainty of arrival. These are opposing inner states, and they produce opposing qualities of action, even when the physical effort appears identical from the outside. What Wattles taught was something rarer and more specific than either idleness or hustle. He taught exact present action. The emphasis on the word present is not incidental. The present place is the only place where action can actually occur. The past cannot be acted upon. The future cannot be entered early. The present task, the one immediately available in the current position, is the only genuine point of contact between the person and the law. Wattles returned to this again and again. Do not try to act in the future position before you have occupied it. Act in the present position with the full force of a creative mind, and the future position will open. Wealth comes through channels. This is central to Wattles' view of how the mechanism actually operates. The formless substance contains all wealth in potential form. It does not deposit wealth arbitrarily. It moves through channels that must be prepared and opened by the right kind of action. Creative action, action from definite thought, faith, and gratitude, prepares those channels. Each complete, efficient act done in the present place is a step in the construction of the channel through which wealth will eventually move. The person who understands this does not resent the present task as beneath their ambition. They recognize it as the current section of the channel being built. Every action performed in the certain way adds to the channel, regardless of whether that action appears significant by external standards. Wattles did not say that only large dramatic actions open channels. He said that all actions performed in the certain way contribute to the movement of wealth in the direction of the person performing them. The humility this requires is not weakness, it is precision. The person who will only act dramatically, who requires that every effort be impressive or visible, leaves large portions of the channel unbuilt. The person who does every present thing completely, regardless of its apparent scale, builds without interruption. When people encounter the phrase, the one certain action, they tend to hear it as a singular physical gesture, the one specific thing to do, the decisive move that unlocks everything. This reading is understandable, but it misses the meaning almost entirely. Wattles was not describing a single event. He was describing a single kind. The one certain action is not identified by its physical form. It is identified by the inner condition from which it proceeds and the completeness with which it is carried out. 100 different physical actions, each performed in the certain way, are all examples of the one certain action. 100 of the same physical action, performed without definite thought or creative consciousness, are all examples of scattered, inefficient motion. This distinction matters enormously because the misreading sends people searching for the right action, the special opportunity, the correct sequence, the secret move that the wealthy people are making while others miss it. That search is itself a form of scattered action. The certain action is not hidden in a specific form. It is hidden in a specific inner state. Once that inner state is established and maintained, the ordinary actions of the present position become the certain action. The transformation is not in what is done. It is in the consciousness from which it is done. Definite creative consciousness is the phrase that most precisely names what Wattles required. The word definite rules out vagueness, hesitation, and divided intent. The word creative distinguishes this consciousness from competitive consciousness, from the mindset that sees wealth as a fixed quantity to be taken from the available supply, rather than as a form to be impressed upon the formless substance. The word consciousness reminds the reader that this is not a technique applied from the outside, but a condition of the mind itself. The method lives inside the person, not in the structure of their schedule or the category of their work. The opposite of certain action is not lazy action, it is scattered force. Scattered force can look incredibly active, it can fill a schedule completely. It can produce genuine physical fatigue, but it operates from division, from a mind that is simultaneously in many places, chasing many things, responding to many pressures, none of which have received the full quality of creative attention required to open a channel. The scattered person is not failing because they are doing too little. They are failing because they are doing many things at a fraction of the force required for any of them to become a completed channel. Understanding this corrects the entire emotional relationship to work. The person who grasps what Wattles meant is no longer trying to outrun their circumstances or overwhelm them with volume. They are doing something more focused and more powerful, choosing the present action, bringing the full quality of a creative mind to it, and completing it before moving forward. This approach does not feel like hustle, it feels like precision. And that feeling, that sense of exact movement without wasted force, is not a reward for getting the method right. It is the evidence that the method is operating. When Wattles used the language of guarantee, he was making a specific claim about the nature of law. Laws do not produce inconsistent results. Gravity does not sometimes hold things to the ground and sometimes release them depending on the day. The law of creative action, properly understood and applied, does not sometimes produce wealth and sometimes fail. Its consistency is not dependent on mood or circumstance. The guarantee belongs to the law itself. The question is never whether the law will work. The question is always whether the person's action is genuinely aligned with the law or only appears to be. The alignment Wattles required is the meeting of three elements: thought, state, and movement. The thought must be definite. The state must be creative, rooted in faith and gratitude rather than in competition and anxiety. The movement must be present, efficient, and complete. When these three are genuinely unified, the action carries with it a quality of force that scattered effort cannot replicate regardless of its volume. Wattles was not using guarantee loosely or as a rhetorical encouragement. He was using it the way a physicist uses certainty about the outcome of a controlled experiment when every variable is properly set. The action that proceeds from this alignment cannot miss because it does not waste its force. Every step builds on the previous one. Every completion opens a new point of contact with the channel through which wealth moves. There is no dilution, no scattering, no energy expended in competition with other people's positions or in anxiety about timing. The full creative force of a unified mind moves in one direction, through the present action toward the impressed form. That is not a metaphor for optimism, That is the description of a mechanism Wattles believed operated as reliably as any law in the physical world. Wealth appears through this process not because the universe rewards virtue as a favor, but because the impressed form, the definite thought held in the creative state, begins to organize the available channels in the direction of its own realization. The action done in the certain way moves the person toward those channels. Each complete act in the present position is a step closer to the point where the prepared channel and the moving person meet. That meeting is not coincidence. It is the result of a process that was set in motion the moment the thought became definite and the action became aligned. The guarantee is real because the mechanism is real. Certain action begins with the quality of presence, not the concept of mindfulness as it circulates in popular culture, but the specific act of bringing the full attention of a creative mind to the task that is immediately before you. The present action is the one available now, not the one planned for tomorrow, not the one that belongs to a more advanced position, not the one that would be available if circumstances were different, the one available now in this place with these resources. Wattles was insistent on this point because the person who is always preparing for the action they will take later never takes the action that is available today, and the channel never gets built. Efficiency, as Wattles used the term, is not speed. The efficient action is the one that gives more in use value than it costs in effort, the one that produces a genuine result rather than the appearance of one. Efficiency in this sense requires discrimination. The person acting efficiently is not doing everything that presents itself. They are doing what is required and doing it completely without wasting force on what is unnecessary. This is not laziness dressed up in philosophy. Knowing what not to do requires a more precise understanding of the aim than knowing what to do. Efficiency is the expression of clarity. Completeness is perhaps the most overlooked requirement in Wattles' framework. The action that is started but not finished does not transmit its full creative charge. It leaves the channel partially constructed. A partially constructed channel carries less, or nothing at all. The habit of finishing what is begun, of staying in contact with the present task until it has received everything it needs to be genuinely complete, is not a minor discipline. It is the act of actually delivering the message that the thought has composed. Every incomplete action is a creative act that never reached its destination. Faith is the inner condition that sustains action through uncertainty. It is not belief that circumstances will immediately rearrange themselves in your favor. It is the held conviction that the law is real, that the action aligned with the law produces its result, and that the absence of immediate visible evidence is not proof that the mechanism has failed. Wattles knew that certain action is not always rewarded instantly. Channels take time to open, but the person who abandons the certain way because results do not arrive on schedule destroys the very continuity that allows the channel to complete itself. The instruction to act without competition is one of the most countercultural elements in all of Wattles' work. The ordinary world runs on competitive logic. There is a limited supply, other people are taking it. You must move faster and more aggressively than they do, or you will be left with less. Wattles rejected this premise at its root. The person acting in the creative plane is not competing for a fixed quantity of wealth. They are impressing a definite form upon formless substance that has no limit. Competition for the available supply is the posture of a mind that does not understand the law. It produces the same exhausted, scattered result as every other form of fearful action. The final element is harmony with the desired form. The action done in the certain way is not chosen arbitrarily. It proceeds from and moves toward the definite mental image the person has impressed upon the formless substance. Every step must be coherent with the direction of that image. An action that moves away from the desired form, even if it appears busy or productive, is not certain action. Alignment between the thought and the act is what gives the act its creative charge. Without that alignment, the effort is real, but the direction is wrong, and real effort in the wrong direction doesn't open the channel. It builds a wall. The mechanism begins before any physical action is taken. Definite thought sets the aim. When the mind holds a clear, specific, sustained image of the desired form, it begins impressing that form upon the formless substance that underlies all visible reality. This is not imagination in the ordinary sense. It is an act of creative consciousness, the placing of a specific instruction into the medium that carries all form. Without this first step, subsequent actions have no anchor. They may produce local results, but they do not build toward the specific form the person desires. The thought is the blueprint. Everything after it is construction. Gratitude sets the state. After the thought has been made definite, the inner condition in which action is taken determines the quality of the action's contact with the creative medium. Wattles was clear that gratitude is not merely an emotion to cultivate for psychological benefit. It is the alignment posture, the inner position that places the person in harmony with the source rather than in opposition to it. The person who enters action from gratitude carries a different quality of contact with the formless substance than the person who enters action from resentment or anxiety. The thought may be equally definite in both cases. The state determines which one transmits. Present action creates contact. With the aim set by thought and the state established by gratitude, the physical action in the present place becomes the point of actual contact between the person and the creative medium. The action is not symbolic. It is real. It reaches into the available circumstances and begins moving them in the direction of the impressed form. The contact is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. But each complete action in the certain way is a genuine engagement with the mechanism that produces wealth. Without this contact, the thought remains an instruction that was sent but never received. Contact opens opportunity. This is where many people expect visible results and are surprised when what arrives instead is a new opening, a conversation, a connection, an unexpected possibility that did not exist before the certain action was taken. Wattles was describing a mechanism, not a vending machine. The action does not produce wealth directly. It opens the next step in the channel. What the person often experiences as luck or coincidence in the lives of the wealthy is actually the cumulative result of many completed certain actions, each of which opened a slightly wider channel, until the opportunity arrived that was large enough to carry the impressed form through into physical reality. Opportunity becomes channel. Not every opportunity is the channel for every person. The person who has been acting in the certain way, as with definite thought from creative consciousness, is prepared to recognize and occupy the channel when it appears, because their action has been building toward it. The person acting from scattered force may encounter the same visible opportunity and fail to recognize it as theirs, because no preparation has made the connection between the opportunity and the impressed form obvious. Recognition is not luck. It is the result of sustained alignment between the thought and the action that followed it. The channel carries wealth. When the channel is prepared and the person is in position, the formless substance moves wealth through it in the direction of the impressed form. This is the moment that appears from the outside as sudden success, breakthrough, or fortunate timing. From the inside, from the perspective of the person who has been doing the certain action with faith and completeness, it is simply the arrival of what the mechanism was always building toward. There is no surprise in it for the person who understands the law. The surprise belongs to observers who only see the channel in the moment it opens, without having witnessed the certain actions that prepared it. Wealth appears because action cooperated with source. This is the final statement of the mechanism, and it is worth holding precisely. Wealth is not created by the person alone. The formless substance supplies what is needed, but the person must cooperate, must align thought, state, and action with the creative law for that supply to find its way through the available channels to the specific form the person has impressed. Cooperation is not passivity. It is active alignment. The person who cooperates with source does more in a meaningful sense than the person who only competes with circumstances. They work with the full force of the law behind them. That is what makes the certain action impossible to miss. Frantic action is the first and most common interruption of the certain mechanism. Frantic means driven by urgency and fear rather than by clarity and law. The frantic person moves fast, generates a great deal of surface activity, and mistakes that activity for the certain action. But the inner condition from which frantic action proceeds, anxiety, competitive pressure, the fear of being too late, is precisely the condition that breaks the connection between the action and the creative medium. The action may physically resemble certain action. The state from which it comes prevents the transmission. Passive waiting is the opposite failure, equally destructive. The person who understands that wealth comes through the formless substance and concludes from this that physical action is unnecessary has misread the law as thoroughly as the person who acts without thought. Wattles wrote that the law requires action. The channel does not build itself. Opportunities do not insert themselves into the life of a person who is only thinking and waiting. The formless substance moves through available channels. Creating those channels requires the person's physical presence and complete effort in the present place. Passive waiting is not spiritual alignment. It is simply inaction wearing the costume of philosophy. Resentful work poisons the quality of contact between the action and the creative medium. As established earlier in this teaching, the inner state from which action proceeds determines the quality of its transmission. Work performed with resentment, with the silent communication that this task is beneath the person's true worth or that these circumstances are obstacles rather than channels, does not transmit the full creative charge. The channel is contaminated at the source. Even if the action is physically complete, the resentment in the performing of it undermines the efficiency Wattles required. Excellence cannot be extracted from contempt. Copying others blindly breaks the alignment between the action and the person's own definite form. When the action is chosen because someone else appears to be succeeding with it, rather than because it proceeds from the person's own definite thought and creative consciousness, the impression in the formless substance is not aligned with the action being taken. The action may be real. The thought behind it belongs to someone else's channel, not the person's own. This produces a specific kind of failure, genuine effort that builds something, but not the thing the person actually desires, and not in the direction of their own impressed form. Starting without completing is the interruption that appears most frequently among people who are genuinely trying. Each new beginning feels like progress. Each incomplete ending feels like a detour on the way to the next attempt. But in terms of channel construction, the incomplete action is a section of pipe that does not connect to the next section. Wealth cannot move through a channel that is interrupted at every joint. Wattles required completeness, not as a moral virtue, but as a functional necessity. The channel must be continuous. Starting many things and finishing few of them is not an aggressive method with a few rough edges. It is a method that guarantees the channel will never be complete enough to carry anything. Acting from lack is the final interruption, and in some ways the most subtle. When the motivation for action is the feeling of not having enough, when the action proceeds from the inner pressure of deficiency, the consciousness at the center of the act is competitive rather than creative. It is anchored in the current condition rather than in the impressed form. Wattles was specific. The person who acts from lack is in a posture of opposition to what they want. They are resisting their own channel by fixing their consciousness on the distance between the present state and the desired form. The certain action requires that the consciousness be placed on the form, not on its absence. Picture an archer who has been told that somewhere in a wide, open landscape there is a single target. The archer is eager, and the archer is afraid. So instead of studying the direction, preparing the stance and drawing the bow with the full force of a unified body, aimed at a specific point, the archer begins shooting, arrow after arrow in every direction, with genuine physical effort and real emotional investment. Some arrows travel far, none of them reach the target. From a distance, the archer appears to be working harder than anyone. From inside the mechanism, the archer is simply filling the landscape with misdirected force. This is the portrait of scattered action, not laziness, not dishonesty, not lack of effort. Misdirected force, energy spent generously, but without alignment, without a fixed aim, without the stillness required to let the direction become clear before the bow is drawn. The landscape is full of arrows. The target has not been touched, and the archer, exhausted and confused, cannot understand why more arrows are not producing the desired result. More arrows were never the solution. The solution was never more. It was alignment. The certain action operates like a different kind of arrow. This arrow is aligned with the law. The aim is set by definite thought. The state of the archer, held in faith, rooted in gratitude, is the steady hand that prevents trembling. The present task is the bow drawn with complete force, nothing held back, nothing divided. The release is the completed action, not started, not half-drawn, but fully committed and through. When the aim, the hand, and the force agree, the arrow moves without deviation. Its path is set before it leaves the bow. The target is not found by luck, it is reached by law. What this means for the viewer is not that they must become perfectly calm or spiritually advanced before they act. It means that before the next action is chosen, the question of alignment must be answered. Does this action proceed from my definite thought? Am I doing it from creative consciousness or from anxiety? Will I bring the full quality of my attention to it and complete it before moving to the next? These are not philosophical questions to debate. They are the practical conditions that determine whether the arrow flies true or adds to the landscape of misdirected effort. Wealth is not hit by accident. In the stories of the people who seem to have found wealth unexpectedly, quickly, or through a series of fortunate coincidences, there is almost always, when examined closely, a history of certain actions that were never visible from the outside. Connections made completely. Opportunities recognized because the prepared mind was present. Channels built quietly through efficient, unglamorous, complete work in the present position. What looks like luck from outside the mechanism looks like law from inside it. The arrow did not find the target by accident. It was aimed from the beginning. Wattles' entire teaching on action can be expressed through this single image. The arrow is in your hand now. The target exists. The formless substance knows the form you have impressed upon it, and the channels that carry wealth toward that form are available. The question is not whether you will release the arrow. You will. The question is whether you will release it from the scattered posture of a frightened archer, shooting in every direction, or from the steady, aligned, complete posture of a person who has made the certain inner preparation and now acts with the full force of law behind every movement. Somewhere between these two archers is the point where your own practice stands today. After this teaching, that point will not be the same. The knowledge of the mechanism changes the responsibility. You now know what certain action requires. The only remaining question is whether you will bring that knowledge into the present position, into the present task, into the next action available to you, and do it completely. There is an enemy to the certain action, and it is not idleness. The person watching this teaching is almost certainly not idle. The calendar is probably full. The days are probably structured around effort. What is missing is not motion. What is missing is unified motion, the quality of action that comes from a single directed creative consciousness rather than from the accumulated pressure of many competing urgencies. The distinction sounds small, its consequences are enormous. The blocker operates from a specific inner source, anxiety. Not laziness, not indifference, not lack of ambition. Anxiety. The anxious mind cannot choose the present action from clarity because it is never fully present. It is always partially in the imagined future, calculating what has not yet arrived and what might not come. From that position, action is chosen not by the law, but by the pressure of the unresolved fear. The action taken from anxiety is chosen to relieve discomfort, not to build a channel. And the relief it provides is temporary, which is why the next anxious action must follow so quickly. Unified motion means something specific. It means that the thought, the state, and the movement are coherent, that the action being taken in the present place is the continuation of the definite form held in creative consciousness, carried in a state of faith and gratitude, and completed with the full quality of attention. This unity is not achieved by discipline alone. It is achieved by the prior work of impressing the definite thought and entering the correct inner state before acting. The blocker prevents this prior work from occurring because the anxious mind does not pause to set the aim. It simply moves. The result of sustained anxious action is a kind of inner fragmentation that becomes invisible through familiarity. The person who has always acted from anxiety cannot easily distinguish this state from natural effort. It feels like motivation. It feels like drive. It has the same texture as ambition. But motivation rooted in law and motivation rooted in fear produce different qualities of action. And over time, the person who has been acting from fear will notice the difference in the results, even if they cannot initially identify the cause. The inner enemy does not announce itself. It wears the most respectable costume available, the appearance of productivity. The person caught in scattered action does not experience themselves as scattered. They experience themselves as busy, committed, and thorough. "I am being productive," the mind says, and the statement is not entirely false. Things are being done. Tasks are being checked off. Hours are being spent. But productivity, in the ordinary sense, measures volume of activity rather than alignment of action. The certain mechanism is invisible to the productivity metric, and the person measuring their own success by that metric never notices the problem. "I am trying everything" is the second disguise, and it carries a particular emotional authority. The person who has tried many things feels justified in their exhaustion. They have earned the right to be frustrated. They have left no option unexplored. But Wattles would have seen this as a precise description of the blocker's method, convincing the person that breadth of attempt is the same as depth of alignment. Trying everything is the structural opposite of doing the one certain thing completely. It is the scattered archer, now proud of how many arrows are in the landscape. "I cannot stop moving" is perhaps the most honest expression of the inner enemy's hold. The person who feels that stopping, even briefly, is dangerous, that pausing to establish the correct inner state before acting would mean falling behind, is operating from a fear that has been reframed as urgency. The inability to stop is not strength. It is the clearest possible evidence that the action is being driven by anxiety rather than by the law. The law does not require constant motion. It requires complete motion. The difference between those two things is the difference between the scattered archer and the certain one. "If I slow down, I will fall behind." This belief is the engine of the entire disguise. It assumes that wealth is a race and that other people are ahead of you in it. This is the competitive consciousness that Wattles spent the first section of his book dismantling. The person who believes this cannot act from the creative plane, because the creative plane does not operate on the logic of races and competitors. It operates on the logic of impressed form and opened channel. Slowing down to align the thought, establish the state, and choose the present action from clarity is not losing ground. It is the only real way to gain it. All of these disguises share a common root: fear wearing the costume of work. The fear says legitimately that wealth has not arrived. It says legitimately that the present position is not the desired one. Then it offers its solution: more motion, more attempts, more urgency, less pause, less alignment. And because the solution feels like effort, it feels like the right kind of answer. Effort is respected. Effort is virtuous. Effort that is misdirected is still exhausting enough to feel like it should be rewarded. The disguise works because the person wearing it genuinely believes in the value of what they are doing. That is what makes it so costly and so difficult to see from the inside. Burnout is the physical ledger of sustained, scattered action. The body can maintain high-volume effort for a period of time that feels, from the inside, like indefinite endurance. But the body is not wrong about its accounts. The person who is acting from anxiety, without the recovery of complete pauses and the restoration of the certain inner state, accumulates a debt of nervous and physical energy that eventually comes due. Burnout is not weakness. It is the accurate result of spending capital faster than it is being replenished. The scattered method has no built-in replenishment because the anxiety that drives it never allows for the stillness in which restoration occurs. The second cost is the absence of a clear channel. Scattered action may produce many partial channels, none of them complete enough to carry wealth. The landscape of a scattered person's work history is often full of genuinely good attempts, things that nearly succeeded, opportunities that were close, efforts that produced real results but fell short of the decisive breakthrough. This is not bad luck. It is the structural outcome of a method that never completes a channel before beginning another one. The certain action builds one channel at a time. The scattered method builds fragments of many. Poor quality work is the third cost, and it follows directly from the division of attention. When the mind is distributed across many competing urgencies, no single task receives the complete quality of attention that excellence requires. The work gets done, but it gets done at the level of competence rather than at the level of creativity. Wattles required that every action give more in use value than it takes in cost, that each act carry a genuine surplus of creative quality. That surplus is not available to the divided mind. The certain action produces quality as a natural consequence of complete attention. The scattered action produces adequacy as the natural consequence of divided attention. Loss of trust is the fourth cost, and it operates in the same way described at the end of the earlier section on frustration. The person who has scattered their action for a long time without seeing the channel open begins to quietly withdraw their faith from the connection between action and result. They may continue to work, the habit of motion is by then deeply established, but the certainty that underlies productive creative action has been replaced by a hollow performance of effort. Going through the motions is not the same as taking the certain action, even when the physical gestures are identical. The inner depletion changes the quality of the contact. The final cost names the deepest pattern. Wealth feels like it keeps moving away. The person who is acting from scattered, anxious force is in a posture that pulls against the channel rather than building it. Not because they are bad or undeserving, but because the inner state of anxiety and competitive tension is, in Wattles's terms, an inner state of opposition to the formless substance. The formless substance does not respond to desperation. It responds to creative alignment. The harder the desperate person pushes, the less their action aligns with the law, and the further the channel seems from completion. The feeling that wealth is always just out of reach is not imaginary. It is the accurate perception of someone who is working against the law rather than with it. The first movement in breaking this pattern is stopping the scatter before stopping the action. This is a critical distinction. What must stop is not effort but fragmentation, the habit of dividing force across many things simultaneously and completing none of them. This requires a pause that the anxious mind will interpret as danger. The pause is not danger. It is the space in which the certain inner state is restored, the aim is clarified, and the present action is chosen from the creative position rather than from pressure. No channel is ever built faster by a person who has not established this position first. Once the scatter stops, the present duty becomes visible. This is the specific task immediately before you in your current position, the one available now, the one connected to your definite aim, the one that can be done with the full quality of a creative mind today. It may not be dramatic. In fact, it usually is not. The present duty tends to be the obvious next step that has been avoided in favor of more impressive or more comfortable actions. But Wattles's entire mechanism depends on the completion of this step, because the channel advances through present duties done completely, not through future ambitions planned impressively. Doing the present duty completely is what transforms the ordinary action into the certain action. The same task done partially or done resentfully or done while divided among other concerns is not the certain action. The certain action is identified not by its physical form, but by its inner conditions: definite thought, creative state, present position, complete execution. When those conditions are met, the ordinary task becomes the channel-building act. When they are absent, no amount of urgency will substitute for them. As each complete action is performed, certainty returns, not as a feeling that must be summoned or sustained by willpower, but as the natural consequence of having done the aligned thing. Completion has its own inner resonance. The mind that has genuinely finished a thing in the certain way carries a different quality of forward momentum into the next action. That momentum is not excitement or adrenaline. It is the quiet, grounded confidence of a person who knows from direct experience that the law works, because they have just watched it work through their own complete and certain action. The turning point begins with a clear negation. There are patterns of action that have been discussed throughout this teaching. patterns that feel productive, that feel like effort, that feel like the kinds of things a serious person pursuing wealth should do, and they must stop, not be moderated, not be adjusted slightly, stopped, because they are not contributing to the channel. They are interrupting it, and the person who moderates an interruption does not remove its effect. They simply experience a smaller version of the same failure. Panic-driven action. The scatter of doing many things from the pressure of urgency, rather than from the clarity of a definite aim, has to stop. This is the first and most structural of the cessations. As long as the engine of the action is anxiety, the action will carry the quality of anxiety into its contact with the creative medium. The contact will be weak, the channel will remain incomplete, and the next wave of anxiety will demand a new batch of urgent actions. This is a closed loop. The only way out of it is to refuse to enter it on the same terms. Copying others as a substitute for the certain method must also stop. Watching what appears to be working for someone else and replicating its visible form, without understanding the invisible creative state from which it proceeds, is a form of action that belongs to someone else's channel. Wattles wrote explicitly that the person who acts in the certain way does not need to compete with anyone or take anything from anyone. The channel for the desired form belongs to the person who has impressed that form in creative consciousness. Someone else's channel cannot be borrowed or replicated. The certain action must proceed from your own definite thought, or it is not certain. Half doing the present work is a habit so common that most people do not recognize it as a choice. It feels like a natural response to having too many things. You do each thing partially and hope that the sum of partial efforts adds up to complete results. It does not. In terms of channel construction, a series of partial actions produces a series of partially constructed channel segments, none of which connects to the next, none of which is complete enough to carry anything. The commitment to completion must be made before the next action begins, not as a promise about all future actions, but as a decision about this one. Resentment toward the action before you must stop, because it changes the inner condition from creative to competitive in the most personal way. To resent the present task is to be in opposition to the channel that is currently available. Wattles required that the person see the present work as the path, not as the obstacle. The task may not be glamorous, the current position may not be the desired one, but the channel is built from here, through this, using what is available now. Approaching that work with resentment introduces a quality of inner resistance that undermines the full creative transmission the action requires. The present place is the channel. This is one of Wattles's most precise and most demanding instructions because it refuses the consolation of waiting for better conditions. There is no better position from which to begin the certain action than the one you occupy now. The current circumstances, however modest or limited they appear, contain the exact point of contact required to begin building the channel toward the desired form. Accepting the present position as the channel does not mean resigning yourself to it permanently. It means recognizing it as the place where the law can currently operate through you and acting accordingly. Efficiency is a spiritual discipline in Wattles's framework, not a productivity strategy. This distinction matters because productivity framing implies that efficiency is about maximizing output per unit of time, a competitive metric aimed at doing more. Wattles' efficiency is about giving more in use value than you take in cost and doing each thing completely. This is a discipline of the inner state as much as of the outer method, bringing the full quality of a creative, grateful, definite mind to the present task is not a workflow technique. It is the expression of a law that operates from the inside out. Wealth responds to complete action. This is the acceptance that most directly contradicts the false method. The ordinary belief is that wealth responds to impressive action, to large-scale effort, to visible achievement. Wattles taught that wealth does not measure the scale of the action. It moves through channels that have been opened by complete action in the certain way. A small action done completely, and in the creative state builds the channel more than a large action done partially, and from anxiety. Accepting this reverses the relationship to work. The ordinary task gains its full weight, and the impressive gesture loses its illusion of superiority. The certain action is available now. This acceptance closes the most common exit that the scattered mind uses to defer alignment. The belief that the right conditions are approaching, but not yet here. The right conditions for the certain action are the conditions that already exist. The present place, the present task, the creative state, which is a matter of inner preparation, not external circumstance. The formless substance does not wait for your circumstances to improve before responding to the definite thought. It responds to the thought and the action in whatever position the person occupies when those things are brought together in the certain way. I take the certain action. This sentence is not a declaration of future intent or a motivational aspiration. It is a statement about identity, about who the person is in relation to the law. The person who has accepted the teachings of this section is no longer the scattered archer. They are the person who draws the bow from the aligned position, aims from the definite thought, and releases with complete force. The identity precedes the specific action and gives every future action its quality. Before the task is chosen, this sentence is already true of the person choosing it. I do the present thing completely. The emphasis here falls on both words equally. Present because the channel is built from here, now, through the immediately available action, not through the imagined future action or the more impressive eventual move. Completely because the channel requires continuity, and continuity requires that each step is fully finished before the next begins. This inner declaration is a practice discipline, not a promise about a single event. Every time the temptation to scatter arrives, and it will arrive, this sentence is the return, the present thing, done completely. I act from source, not fear. This is the distinguishing statement, the one that identifies the inner condition from which the action proceeds. Fear and source are not equally available positions. Fear is the default of the unexamined mind under pressure. Source, the creative alignment with the formless substance, the definite thought, the gratitude, requires a prior act of inner preparation. But once established, it changes the quality of everything that proceeds from it. The action from source is the certain action. The action from fear is scattered force. Knowing the difference is the turning point. Acting from it consistently is the practice. My action cannot miss when it is aligned. This statement is not an expression of arrogance or the bypassing of real work. It is the logical consequence of everything Wattles taught about the law. The action that is aligned, with definite thought from creative consciousness in the present place, performed with complete efficiency, is aimed at the target with the full force of a unified mind. It does not miss because there is no division in it, no competing direction, no wasted force. The guarantee belongs to the alignment, not to the actor's confidence about the outcome. When the alignment is real, the certainty follows from the law. There are only two real positions available to the person who acts in pursuit of wealth. Not two styles, not two philosophies, not two schools of thought, two fundamentally different kinds of action, and the choice between them determines not just the result, but the entire quality of the effort. The first is scattered effort, many actions, each partial, driven by urgency, chosen from anxiety, never brought to full completion. The second is certain action, one kind of movement, present, efficient, complete, proceeding from the aligned creative state. These two positions are not equally effective in degrees. One builds the channel, the other does not. Scattered effort feels busy. This is its great appeal. The person choosing scattered effort never sits quietly with the experience of having done nothing because they are always doing something. The schedule is full, the energy is spent, the effort is genuine. Busyness is a powerful emotional reward for the anxious mind because it silences the fear temporarily, not by resolving it, but by drowning it in motion. The cost of this trade is the channel. The busyness is real. The channel is not being built. And the person who is very busy and building no channel is not closer to wealth than the person who is doing less and building one. Certain action feels exact. This is its defining quality, the quality that distinguishes it from both scattered effort and passive waiting. The person taking certain action may be working with intensity and commitment, but underneath the effort is a quality of precision that the scattered person does not feel. The aim is set, the state is right, the present task is clear, the completion is coming. There is no residue of unresolved urgency pulling attention to the next thing before this thing is done. That exactness is not calmness in the passive sense. It is the concentrated force of a unified mind that knows where it is going and is moving there without waste. Exactness is the choice. Not as a stylistic preference between two equally valid approaches to work, but as the recognition of a law. The certain action is not superior to scattered effort because it feels better or produces less fatigue, though it does both of these things over time. It is superior because it is the action that the law responds to. Wattles did not write about the action that might work or the action that seems to have a better theoretical basis. He wrote about the action that guarantees wealth. The guarantee comes from the alignment with law. The choice is between accepting that alignment as your method or continuing to mistake busyness for creation. Only one of these is the certain way. Applying the certain action does not begin with a new schedule or a revised productivity system. It begins with a shift in the question you ask before acting. The ordinary question is, what do I need to do today? This question answers itself with a list, many items each pressing, none prioritized by alignment with the definite form or evaluated by whether the inner state is prepared to receive them. The certain question is different. What is the present action? Not what needs to be done in general, but what single thing, connected to the definite aim, is available to be done completely right now. That question is then followed immediately by a second. Am I doing it completely? The distinction between starting something and doing it completely is not merely a matter of finishing. It is a matter of bringing the full quality of creative attention to the task for the entire duration of its completion. The certain action is not finished when the task is technically done. It is finished when the task has received everything that your creative consciousness could give it, when the use value genuinely exceeds the cost, and the channel segment is solid enough to connect to the next one. The third question is the diagnostic. Is this fear or efficiency? This question operates as a filter on the inner condition from which the action is proceeding. Fear produces frantic action, motion chosen to relieve anxiety rather than to build the channel. Efficiency produces certain action, movement chosen because it is the present duty, done because it advances the impressed form, completed because the law requires completeness. If the honest answer to this question is fear, the action should be paused, the inner state reset through gratitude and the clarification of the definite aim, and then resumed from the efficient position. These three questions form a daily practice, not a one-time audit. The scattered tendency does not dissolve after a single day of applying the certain method. The anxious mind will repeatedly offer its old arguments: urgency, comparison, the fear of falling behind. The daily perception shift is the act of returning to these questions each time those arguments arrive, not in a spirit of resistance, but in the spirit of law. The law is reliable. The questions are how the reliable law is applied to the specific moment at hand. Focus on one aligned movement at a time does not mean doing one thing per day or operating at a slow pace. It means that while the current action is being done, it receives the full quality of creative attention. The next action waits. The previous action is finished. The current one is the certain action. When it is complete, genuinely complete, not abandoned, the focus moves cleanly to the next aligned movement. This is not a productivity technique. It is channel construction. Each focused movement adds a solid section. Over time, the solid sections connect, and the channel is capable of carrying what the formless substance has been preparing to deliver. The thought patterns that drive scattered action are not random. They have a structure, and that structure can be identified and replaced. The most common of them is, I must do everything. This thought operates as a command that no human being can fully obey, but that keeps the mind in a state of perpetual mobilization, always scanning for the next thing that should be added to the effort, always aware of the things not yet done, never fully present to the thing currently being done. Replacing this thought requires a specific alternative, not just a general reassurance. The replacement is, I must do the right thing completely. Not everything, the right thing, completely. The second correction involves the belief about timing. "I am behind" is one of the most destructive thoughts available to the person pursuing wealth in the competitive consciousness, because it places the anchor of attention on the gap between the current position and the desired one. From that position, action is always desperate, always trying to close the gap, always comparing the present moment to the imagined arrival point. The Wattles replacement for this thought is, "I act in the certain way now, not tomorrow, not when circumstances improve. Now in this position, with this action from this creative state." The law does not operate on a schedule of delays and catch-ups. It operates continuously from the present position. The third correction addresses the volume assumption directly. More is better feels like wisdom because it aligns with competitive logic and general cultural reinforcement. In the creative framework, it is demonstrably false. The correct replacement is, "Complete is powerful." A single action brought to full completion in the certain way carries more creative charge than 10 actions each performed at 10% of their potential. The channel built by complete actions is solid. The channel built by many partial actions is a collection of disconnected fragments. Replacing "more is better" with "complete is powerful" is not a reduction of ambition. It is a redirection of force from volume to quality. Thought discipline is not the suppression of the old thought patterns through willpower. It is the consistent practice of recognizing them when they appear, as familiar structures as known interruptions, and returning to the certain alternative without drama. The old thought appears. You recognize it. You return to the correct one. This cycle, repeated many times each day over many days, gradually shifts the default inner commentary from anxious competition to creative alignment. The shift is not dramatic, it is incremental, but the action that proceeds from each successive stage of that shift is measurably more certain. Wattles did not present thought discipline as an act of imagination or positive thinking in the popular sense. He presented it as the management of the most important variable in the wealth equation. If the thought is vague, the impression in the formless substance is vague. If the thought is competitive, the action is competitive. If the thought is definite and creative, the action is certain and the channel advances. Managing the thought is not a secondary practice that accompanies the real work. In Wattles' framework, it is the primary work. Everything that appears in the external world proceeds from the inner condition of the thought. The first step in taking the certain action on any given occasion is to enter gratitude before the action begins. This is not a lengthy ritual. It is a genuine shift in inner orientation, a brief but real movement from the posture of deficiency to the posture of alignment. Gratitude does not require that the present circumstances be ideal. It requires that the person acknowledge what is already present and recognize it as the ground from which the channel will be built. The person who enters action from gratitude carries a fundamentally different quality of contact with the creative medium than the person who enters from resentment or urgency. This single step changes the inner condition in which everything that follows occurs. With the inner state established in gratitude, the next movement is to clarify the aim, not in a broad or aspirational sense, but precisely. What is the definite form toward which the present action is a contribution? This clarification connects the immediate task to the impressed thought. It ensures that the action about to be taken is a step in the construction of the channel, not a detour into someone else's direction or a response to external pressure unrelated to the definite aim. The aim does not need to be restated elaborately. It needs to be genuinely present in the consciousness from which the action proceeds. From that inner position, gratitude established, aim clarified, the present task is identified. The present task is the one immediately available in the current position, the one that the definite aim requires to be done next, and the one that can be completed with the resources at hand today. It is not the most impressive action or the most ambitious one. It is the necessary one, the next section of the channel. Identifying it correctly requires the kind of precision that the scattered mind, already racing ahead to future possibilities, tends to skip. The present task is always closer and usually simpler than the mind under pressure believes it to be. Doing it with excellence is the expression of the efficiency principle in practice. Excellence here does not mean perfectionism, and it does not mean spending more time on the task than it requires. It means giving the task the full quality of creative attention for the entire duration of its completion, treating it as the channel it is, not as an obstacle between the current moment and the next thing. Wattles wrote that the person who acts in the certain way gives more in use value than they receive in payment. This standard of giving is not a sacrifice. It is the precise mechanism by which the action transmits its creative charge into the channel, complete before scattering. When the task is done, when it has received everything it required to be genuinely finished, the transition to the next action can occur, not before. The temptation to move before completion arrives in many forms: a new thought that seems urgent, a comparison to what someone else is doing, an anxiety that the current task is taking too long. All of these are the scattered method reasserting itself. The discipline of completing before scattering is the practical expression of Wattles' entire teaching on efficient action. The channel grows from completions. It does not grow from transitions. Doubt is not an aberration. It is a regular visitor in the life of anyone practicing the certain method. The law does not produce instant visible results on demand, and the mind under pressure will use the absence of immediate evidence as an argument for returning to the scattered method. This is taking too long. I should be doing more. Others are moving faster. These are the voices of doubt, and they arrive with genuine emotional weight. The question is not whether doubt will come. The question is whether the person will allow doubt to choose their next action. The instruction for restoring the state under doubt begins with a pause, not with a new action, not with a more impressive effort, not with the anxious acceleration of the existing effort. A pause. This pause is not surrender or inaction. It is the deliberate refusal to let doubt make the choice. The anxious mind, given control in a moment of doubt, will immediately default to scattered action, to trying more things, to copying visible successes, to the familiar comfort of busyness. The pause interrupts this default before it executes. Inside the pause, the certain inner state can be restored, gratitude entered, aim clarified, creative position recovered. From the restored state, the next movement is to return to the present duty. Not to a dramatic intervention, not to a complete restructuring of the effort, not to a new strategy. The present duty, the one immediately available, connected to the definite aim, completable now. This return is not a resignation to small things. It is the precise application of the law in the face of the moment, most likely to produce deviation from it. The person who returns to the present duty under doubt is practicing the certain method at its most demanding level. They are choosing law over fear in the exact moment when fear has its most persuasive case. Completing one thing under doubt is more powerful than completing many things in the absence of doubt. When the certain action is taken and completed while doubt is present, when the channel advances despite the mind's argument for scattering, the evidence generated by that completion is of a different quality than ordinary evidence. It is experiential confirmation of the law. The person who completes one aligned action while the doubt is loudest carries after that completion a certainty that did not exist before, not because the circumstances changed, but because the inner knowledge of the mechanism deepened through direct application. Completion restores certainty. This is one of the most practical and most overlooked principles in Wattles' entire framework. Certainty, the functional state of faith that the law works, does not primarily come from external evidence, from reading the right texts, or from sustained intellectual conviction. It comes from the direct experience of having applied the law and watched it produce its result. Each genuine completion in the certain way adds to this experiential base. Over time, the person who has been completing certain actions has accumulated a history of channel construction that is impossible to argue away with doubt. The certainty is no longer theoretical. It is the record of the mechanism operating through their own specific life. Consider a person who has been working for years with genuine dedication. The schedule is full. The resume of attempts is real. Business ventures started and not quite completed. Skill-building initiatives that stalled before the compound returns arrived. Opportunities pursued halfway before something else seemed more urgent. From outside, this person looks like someone who is genuinely trying. From inside the mechanism, they are looking at a landscape full of arrow shafts, effort expended in many directions, none of them completing the channel from its beginning to the point where wealth can pass through. At some point, perhaps through a text like Wattles, perhaps through the accumulation of enough frustrated effort, this person stops. Not stops working, stops scattering. They take the first genuine pause in a long time and ask the certain questions. What is my definite aim? Am I in gratitude? What is the present action connected to that aim? The pause itself is uncomfortable. The anxious mind protests. The calendar still has its demands. But the stop is real, and in the stillness it creates something clarifies. There is one thing, one present duty, that has been consistently avoided in favor of more comfortable or more impressive activities. So they do it, not dramatically, not with a major announcement or a complete life restructuring. They take the present action, the specific, ordinary, available step, and they bring to it the full quality of a mind that has entered gratitude, clarified the aim, and chosen completeness over scattering. The action may take 1 hour or 1 day. The quality of attention it receives is unlike anything this person has brought to the many previous attempts, and when it is done, genuinely done, not abandoned at the 80% mark, something shifts. Not in the external world, not yet. In the channel. Within days or weeks, something arrives that was not available before. A conversation with someone who opens an unexpected connection. A response to something that had been dormant for months. A recognition that creates a new possibility in exactly the direction of the definite aim. From outside, it looks like luck. From inside the mechanism, it looks exactly like what Wattles described. The channel opened by the complete certain action began to carry the wealth that the formless substance had been prepared to deliver. The action that seemed small was the section of the channel that completed the connection. The result was not an accident. It was the law operating as advertised. Everything taught in this video reduces to a single exact statement. Wealth is not guaranteed by motion. It is guaranteed by certain action. Motion, as a category, is neutral. Motion fills hours and produces fatigue and generates the appearance of effort. Certain action is something else entirely. It is motion with thought behind it, gratitude beneath it, presence throughout it, and completeness at the end of it. These are not additions to action. They are the conditions that transform ordinary motion into the specific kind of movement that the law of wealth responds to. Certain action is complete action in the creative state. That phrase is the compression of Wattles' entire teaching on efficient action. Completeness and creativity are the two requirements that most people miss. Completeness because the scattered mind prefers beginnings to endings, and creativity because the anxious mind defaults to competition. The person who acts completely and creatively is rare, not because the method is unavailable or requires unusual gifts, but because the understanding required to choose it consistently runs directly against the cultural conditioning that equates busyness with progress and volume with virtue. The law does not care about busyness. The law does not measure effort or honor volume. The law responds to alignment, definite thought, the creative state of faith and gratitude, present action, complete execution. When these four elements come together in a single action, that action adds to the channel. When the channel is complete, wealth moves through it. This is the certain mechanism. This is the principle that Wattles called the science of getting rich, not because it requires scientific training, but because it operates with the consistency and reliability of a scientific law. The person who applies it correctly does not hope for wealth. They build the channel and let the law do what law does. The old life had a texture you already know well. Mornings that began with lists rather than with clarity. Days shaped by urgency rather than by law. Energy spent in many directions before any single thing was complete. Evenings carrying the particular fatigue of busyness without the particular satisfaction of completeness. The old life was not a failure of character. It was the faithful execution of a method that was never going to produce what it promised, regardless of how sincerely it was applied. The exhaustion was real. So was the effort. The method was simply wrong. The new life does not look dramatically different from the outside. The person still works. The days are still full. The effort is still real. But the inner texture is entirely different. Clarity precedes action. The present duty is chosen from the creative state rather than from the pressure of anxiety. Each task receives complete attention and is brought to genuine completion before the next one begins. The resentment of the present work has been replaced by its recognition as the available channel. The comparison to others has been replaced by the discipline of the own impressed form. The busyness has been replaced by exactness. The old mind tried everything. This is the most honest description of the exhausted, scattered approach, a genuine attempt to cover every possibility, to leave no approach untried, to outperform the failure of any single method with the sheer number of methods applied. The old mind was not unintelligent, it was misdirected. It understood that more of the wrong thing would not eventually become the right thing. But the anxiety at its root kept generating the same prescription, regardless of the evidence against it. More, harder, faster, different. The old mind ran this cycle until something broke it. The new mind does the certain thing. This is the entire summary of the transformation. Not many things, not impressive things, not things copied from the apparent success of others. The certain thing, the one aligned with the definite aim done from the creative state in the present position with complete efficiency. The new mind is not a mind that has achieved perfect inner peace or arrived at some final spiritual elevation. It is a mind that has chosen a different method and applies it consistently. The difference between the old mind and the new one is not talent or fortune. It is the understanding of which kind of action the law responds to. The action that cannot miss is the action aligned with law. This is the central synthesis, the sentence that contains everything this teaching has been building toward. Alignment is not a feeling of confidence or a belief that things will work out. It is the specific meeting of definite thought, creative state, present position, and complete execution in a single unified movement. When those elements are genuinely present, the action does not need to be dramatic or perfectly timed. It carries within its very structure the connection to the formless substance from which wealth proceeds. That action may look small. In fact, it often does. The sections of a channel do not announce their importance in advance. The certain action that opens the decisive opportunity may be a letter written completely, a conversation completed honestly, a present duty done with full creative attention on an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon. From outside the mechanism, this action looks like ordinary work. From inside the mechanism, it is the step that completes the channel. The law does not distinguish between visible and invisible actions. It responds to the quality of alignment, not the scale of the gesture. A unified mind carries its full force into every action it takes. This is the final and most important distinction between the scattered person and the person of certain action. The scattered person distributes their force, their attention, and their creative capacity across many things simultaneously, ensuring that nothing receives the complete quality required to build the channel. The unified mind brings everything to the present action, the definite thought, the creative state, the present position, the intention of completeness. That unified force, concentrated, aligned, and complete, is what Wattles meant by the action that guarantees wealth. Not the size of the action, the wholeness of the person taking it. After everything taught in this video, the question that remains is simple and direct. What is your certain action right now? Not in general, not someday, not when circumstances improve. Right now. What is the present duty that is connected to your definite aim, available in your current position, and waiting to receive the full quality of a creative mind that has entered gratitude, clarified its purpose, and committed to completeness? That question is not rhetorical. It is the practical door between this teaching and the wealth it describes. The door opens when the question is answered with an action, not with a plan. The declaration that follows this video is not a motivational affirmation or a positive statement to repeat for comfort. It is an identity claim, a statement about what kind of person you are choosing to be in relation to the law Wattles revealed. The person who declares it is choosing the certain way over scattered effort, completeness over busyness, creative consciousness over anxious competition. The person who declares it and means it has already begun to take the certain action, because the declaration itself is the alignment of thought with intent that precedes and shapes every movement that comes after it. If this teaching has reached you, if somewhere in the words of Wallace Wattles you recognize the pattern that has been quietly exhausting you and quietly interrupting your channel, then you already know what kind of action you are being called to. Not more action, the certain action. The one that is aligned with your definite aim, the one that proceeds from gratitude and creative consciousness, the one that you will bring to genuine completion before you scatter toward the next thing. That is not a description of effort you will apply someday. That is the description of who you are choosing to be, beginning now. Declare it in the comments below. Write it plainly, so the commitment is real and the identity is claimed. I take the certain action, not as a wish or a hope, but as a statement of what is already true of you in this moment. The moment you chose to understand the law, rather than simply to work harder against it. The viewer who writes those words is not performing a ritual. They are making the same kind of inner claim that precedes every complete action in the certain way. A definite statement from a creative consciousness that sets the direction before the movement begins. I take the certain action. Let those words carry the weight of everything taught in this video. The exhaustion of scattered effort, the recognition of the false method, the understanding of the mechanism, the choice of completeness over busyness, of law over anxiety, of the certain way over the ordinary way that keeps the industrious person working without ever finishing the channel. You know what the certain action is now. You know what it requires. And you know, with the same certainty that Wattles expressed in the text he left behind, that the action aligned with law is impossible to miss. Wallace Wattles spent his life tracing the invisible mechanism behind wealth, thought, and the creative law, and much of what he wrote remains hidden beneath the surface of the popular summaries. This channel exists to bring those hidden teachings into full light. The certain way, efficient action, gratitude as a creative force, the formless substance, definite thought, and the inner conditions that allow wealth to move through the channels a prepared person builds. If this video reached something real in you, subscribe so that the next teaching is waiting when you return. Every video on this channel is built to carry you deeper into the classical law, not as a motivational summary, but as the kind of sustained, serious teaching that the material actually requires. The certain way is not a slogan, it is a discipline. Subscribe and stay in it. From this moment, something is different. The scattered archer who's been filling the landscape with misdirected arrows has seen the law, and seeing it changes the responsibility. The next time urgency arrives wearing the costume of productivity, demanding that you do more, start more, copy more, scatter more, you will recognize it, not because the recognition is always easy, but because you now know what it costs. The channel is not built by arrows in every direction. It is built by the aligned movement of a person who has chosen exactness over volume, completeness over busyness, law over fear. Stop the scatter. Choose the present action. Bring to it the full quality of a mind that has entered gratitude, clarified the aim, and committed to completion before movement. Do not abandon it before it is finished. Do not dilute it with the competing urgencies that will arrive before it is done. Give it everything, not because every task deserves endless time, but because every complete action in the certain way is a section of the channel through which your wealth will eventually move. Each completion advances what no amount of scattered effort ever could. This is the method, this is the law, this is the certain way. The certain action is impossible to miss.